The retro gaming community just crossed a massive milestone: 200,000 members on Reddit alone. With that surge comes a flood of new people hitting the exact same crossroads when they decide to start playing classic games. You have to make a choice. Do you chase the physical feeling of your childhood by tracking down original, aging hardware? Or do you skip the headache and buy a modern emulation device that just works? If you go the nostalgia route, you sign up to maintain 20-year-old electronics. You take on the preservation of a dead ecosystem. This path forces you to deal with physical decay. You will encounter degraded, non-removable batteries that refuse to hold a charge, and you will spend hours digging through dead forum links to find software sync tools that lost support decades ago. This chart plots setup friction against emulation performance. Top left, high performance, low friction, features modern single-board computers built to bypass historical hurdles. Conversely, vintage devices sit entirely in the bottom right, low performance, high friction zone. Every hour spent playing is preceded by time spent troubleshooting. Your personal tolerance for that friction effectively dictates which hardware era you belong in. Let's look at the hardware landscape back in 2005. Before dedicated retro handhelds existed, people tried to squeeze games onto flagship business PDAs. Today, collectors looking for an authentic Palm OS experience often start with the Palm Tungsten E2. It runs on a 200 MHz Intel X-Scale processor and holds exactly 32 megabytes of internal memory. It uses a classic slate-style form factor with a 320 by 320 screen and a 5-way directional pad, completely skipping the bulky slider designs of that era. Because of those tight hardware constraints, your emulation ceiling is extremely low. You are strictly capped at basic 8-bit systems like the original Game Boy. If you wanted more power back then, you looked at the Palm LifeDrive. Tech historians still romanticize this device today because of its massive storage capacity. This is the LifeDrive. Billed as a mobile manager, it ditched the vertical layout for a horizontal menu structure and a large color display aimed squarely at media consumption. To get 4 gigabytes of storage in 2005, Palm made a massive architectural compromise. Instead, they bypassed flash memory entirely and literally crammed a tiny, spinning mechanical hard drive directly into the plastic casing. Because the operating system and all your apps run off that physical spinning disk, you face brutal lag times. Opening a simple application often leaves you staring at a blank white screen for several seconds, while a drive physically spins up to find your data. These devices are vital pieces of computing history, but if you buy one expecting the responsiveness of a modern smartphone, they become high-friction traps. By 2007, the community moved past business PDAs and started building dedicated devices. Handhelds like the GP2X and the Dingoo A320 kicked off the pioneer era of open-source Linux gaming. These early machines prized flexibility over usability. Getting a single game to run properly could require hours of editing text files and manually configuring emulator settings. And the physical experience rarely justified that effort. Manufacturers threw them together with cheap plastics and stiff controls that fought back against your thumbs. Today, those physical compromises are glaring. An unergonomic, mushy D-pad makes precision platforming actively frustrating. The pioneer era laid the software foundation we rely on now, but actually playing on them today is a chore. They lack the premium, heavy feel of a vintage Palm and completely miss the user-friendly nature of modern handhelds. Fast forward to the present. The market is saturated with highly capable, affordable Linux handhelds like the Anbernic RG35XX series. You drop files on a microSD, connect the handheld to Wi-Fi, and it scrapes your box art, configuring the emulators automatically. Within minutes, you have access to a massive library of thousands of perfectly emulated titles right in your pocket. The performance leap is massive. You get flawless, upscaled Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 gameplay, systems that would have completely choked a 2005 PDA. Removing that friction creates a new problem: choice paralysis. When you have 10,000 games instantly available, individual titles lose their weight and start to feel disposable. This matrix evaluates our 3 hardware eras across storage tech, setup difficulty, battery life, and peak performance. Pay close attention to the setup and battery rows. We moved from irreplaceable cells and archaic sync cables straight to plug-and-play software with reliable lithium polymer batteries. Every user has a different budget for frustration. To find your path, you have to decide if you are a tinkerer, a pragmatist, or a historian. This flowchart maps out the decision. The critical starting point asks one simple question: what is your primary goal? If your goal is preserving tech history, follow this path. You value authenticity over convenience, making you the perfect candidate for vintage PDAs and original consoles. You are a tinkerer. You actively enjoy the friction of soldering replacement parts, troubleshooting ancient drivers, and keeping dead operating systems alive. Just know what you're signing up for. On this path, actually playing the games is a secondary activity. Your primary hobby is hardware maintenance. Let's look at the other branch. If your goal is actually playing games, you take the route of the modern pragmatist. You have limited free time, you want sharp visuals, save states, and immediate access to childhood favorites without the headache of dead batteries. There is a middle ground if you demand original, era-accurate hardware, but still want high performance. Devices like the Sony PSP represent the absolute peak of dedicated vintage gaming power. However, if you stick to the modern SBC route, you have to accept that these devices are highly disposable. They are temporary tools built on cheap chips that will likely be obsolete in 2 years. Building a satisfying retro gaming setup requires you to be honest with yourself. Look at the era of friction a piece of hardware requires, and make sure it exactly matches your own personal patience budget.